here in the middle of the Alps with a sock over my microphone. That's because I'm actually hiking in the Alps at the moment. I'm in Annecy in France, and it's just absolutely stunning here. It's so beautiful. And yesterday I set up one of potentially my favorite A-roll shots ever. I set the shot up and it had the Alps in the background. Like I said, I was so happy with the look. And then sadly I got the audio home and it sounded like this. Professional environments. Now, unfortunately, I just did not have a dead cat. It was a really real shame because it, as I say, that A-roll shot looked super nice. But here we are, I'm recording it again. I'm here with the Canon EOS R6, and that is the camera I want to talk about today. I know that I've talked about this camera quite a bit here on the channel, but hopefully this will wrap up some of my thoughts and feelings about the camera. I had a bit of a drama last week. For anyone who follows the channel, you guys will know that I record on a Canon C200 for most of my professional work. It's an absolutely incredible cinema camera, and it has been an absolute workhorse for the sort of 6 months or so that I've owned it. But I did upgrade my B camera to the Canon EOS R6. The thing with this camera is it shoots incredible 10-bit high quality video internally, and that really did show up the age of the C200 in terms of the ability to shoot internal 10-bit video. And I actually upgraded to the Canon C70. It arrived the other day. So my C70 has just arrived and it's got an issue. So it's literally you can see it there. See how much give that's got. It literally feels so loose and rickety. Real shame. Literally came this morning. So I had to return that. It's actually being fixed at the moment. Hopefully I will have it back in a few weeks, but it's meant that I've had to work on a professional basis with the Canon EOS R6 for a little while. I've had, a 2 or 3 shoots where I've only had the R6. I'm also here in France only with the R6 for this trip. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the good on this camera, the bad on this camera, and at the end, one reason why this camera is still sort of limited in terms of its professional or the ability to use this camera on totally professional gigs or sets. So first of all, the portability. This camera is absolutely tiny, and we will talk about the picture just in a little bit more detail shortly, but being able to shoot internal 4K 60 in 10-bit into a camera of this form factor and size is just amazing. Coming from an EOS R and a C200, these cameras are just incredible now for the size and portability. And when you've also combined that with fantastic in-body image stabilization, this camera does have really good IBIS functionality. It means you can really rely on the camera in terms of a run-and-gun filmmaking workhorse, all in a really tiny form factor. We will talk about the IBIS in a little bit more detail later. The IBIS is really good on this camera, but you kind of have to know how to use it. And after a bit of practice, you realize that it's really fantastic for almost static angles, static shots. If you're just holding an angle, you can almost lock that shot off. And with a bit of post stabilization as well, a shot might look like it was shot on a tripod, which is pretty crazy considering it's just a static handheld shot. It's also really good for movements, pans, reveals, that type of thing. But there are some limitations, and we will talk about those later. The picture quality is amazing. We don't need to talk about this all too much. I've covered this a lot here on the channel, but it shoots in amazing 10-bit 4K 60, 4K 25, 24 frames a second. The colors and the footage look really beautiful. Hopefully you guys are enjoying some of the clips here I've taken on this trip. One of the other bonuses that you can record in C-Log 3, which is kind of one of my favorite log formats from Canon. I either stick to C-Log 3 or C-Log 2, and like I said, a really high quality file format for shooting in. And then finally, another really good thing about the camera is when you are shooting in these file formats, that 4K 60, 10-bit footage, with other cameras, your data rates and the stuff will just be tearing through storage. And on the Canon EOS R6, Canon has something called IPB Lite, which is an extremely efficient file saving format. You're basically saving a ton of space without degrading your quality. From the good onto the bad, first of all is that IBIS we talked about. When you're on a trip like this, sometimes you just need to throw your stabilization on and not worry too much. Basically, the IBIS is really good apart from when you use it for tracking or moving or walking shots. So basically, steps, it doesn't do well with actually handling steps. Even when you're using a gimbal walk, a nice slow walk, you're going to get shake, you're going to get slightly weird camera flicks and moves, and that really is a problem on the R6 R6, so you kind of just have to learn how the IBIS works. This is basically not a gimbal replacement. And there's something which just bugged me. I know that this is not a, this is not a unique feature to the EOS R6, but working with cinema cameras now for so long, variable ND filters are a pain, and I hate them, and they're just kind of not really good for, in terms of like run and gun shooting. You always have to like work out threads and filter threads. Maybe a little bit unfair to like blame the R6, but that's just one of the things which bugs me about shooting on cameras of this size. And then really we get to the main thing, the main issue, still the issue that kind of stops me just taking this camera and kind of almost like, for instance, buying 2 of them and just using that as my professional gear. And it's the fact that this camera does still overheat. It's just always something you need to kind of keep in the back of your mind. For instance, I have a job which I've accepted from a production company for next week to be a B shooter camera, or B shooter for the day. And I've actually had to warn them that my only camera right now is the R6 and it might overheat. And that's not a good conversation to have with a potential production company that, are going to book you for more than one shoot, more than one piece of work. And it basically means that if we were shooting really long interviews, I run the risk of being the one person on that set that is actually slowing down the production because my camera has overheated if we've done maybe 45 minutes of solid 4K 24 frames a second filming. Sometimes the camera just might shut off and not let you record any further, and that is a serious issue. The most important thing to check and ask yourself is that going to affect you and your workflow? Most of the time it does not, especially when I have an A camera. Right now, if luckily it hasn't actually been an important factor on any of the shoots I've been working on. The R6 has been more than good enough. So on the whole, a really good experience. Like, I love shooting with the R6 as I've been able to take the R6 and a 24-105mm lens on this trip, and I've basically needed nothing else. It has been a really good experience, and that's kind of my thoughts on the camera. I'd love to hear yours. Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you next week.